Hello, everyone. My name is Beth Cochran, and I'm currently an IMSL consultant for Magnet Schools of America and have been a part of writing over 6 MSAP grants. If you are writing the personnel section of your MSAP grant, then you are well on your way to completing the grant. Yay! In a general way, the management plan, among other things, talks about personnel and what duties they need to do to make sure the grant gets implemented. Answering the question, what will they do to make the grant happen? In the quality of personnel section of the grant, the qualifications of the people that will be implementing the grant are explained. Answering the question, do the people have the skills and background necessary to effectively implement the grant? It is really important to remember this distinction as you write your management and personnel sections to know what to emphasize about the people involved in your grant in what section so you get the full points for each section. These are the 2024 grant regulations that recently came out. Be sure to review the new grant regulations carefully if you have written before so you see where the changes are to know what subtle shifts are being emphasized. And if you are a new MSAP grant writer, then it is important to review the regulations carefully to know what to expect. For example, before 2023, the personnel section used to be 5 points. In 2023, the personnel section moved to 15 points, and this year it's moved to 20 points. So there's an increased focus on the importance of picking a qualified project director and teachers to teach in the magnet schools. As you can see, quality of personnel is worth 20 points versus the quality of project design section that's worth 30 points. So your number of pages should reflect that and have fewer pages for personnel than quality of project design. But every point is critical. Districts that receive the grant may only lose 1 or 2 points over the span of the whole grant. District leadership support is important in helping support the outreach and recruiting necessary to meet the desegregation goals of your grant. So before you start to address the project director, it is helpful to talk about key senior leadership people in your district that the project director reports to. Ultimately, everyone answers to the superintendent, so it's important to talk about the qualifications of the superintendent to oversee the grant. Make any connection you can to the focus of your grant. For example, if you are writing an arts theme into your grant and the superintendent has an arts background, then be sure to capitalize on that. Or if your superintendent has done a lot of equity work or work in magnet schools, then capitalize on that. After the superintendent, it really depends on the size and the positions in your district. In a small district, it may just be the assistant superintendent of academics that you talk about. But in a large district, they usually have separate assistant superintendents for academics, equity, magnets and choice, etc. Don't just write about every senior leadership person in your district. Focus on those that are directly tied to the purpose of the grant: diversity, equity, magnet themes, academic programs. These are not positions that would be funded by the grant, but they help support the successful implementation of your grant. Resumes should be in the appendix. So now let's break down the grant regulations into different components. The first person to talk about is the person that will manage the grant to make sure that everything written into the grant is implemented with fidelity. These are some of the qualifications that you want to look for in who you hire for the project director position: previous grant manage experience, magnet and equity experience, someone who can collaborate with principals and magnet coordinators, someone with the ability to give feedback to people they oversee, experience with completing federal reports. Budget experience is a must, and writing and overseeing grants for all things, but in particular, professional development. If you know who you want to manage the grant already, then you can write that person into the grant specifically and share their exact qualifications and include their resume in the appendix. But if you do not know who will manage the grant and you plan to hire someone if you get the grant, then focus on the qualifications you will look for when you hire for the project director position. Unless you have received the MSAP grant before, you will have to work with the human resource people in your district to create a job description for the position that you will include in the appendix of your grant instead of a resume if you know who you want the project director to be. The project director you would want to write into the grant budget to be fully funded by the MSAP grant. Take a moment to think about what senior leadership positions you might want to include in your MSAP grant. For this section, you should think about key people already in the district that are critical in implementing the grant that will be non-grant funded, as well as the MSAP funded positions that you want the grant to fund. So even though all of these positions will not be funded by the grant, they are still important to talk about if they will be helping to implement the grant. Some examples of non-grant funded staff to include in your grant are district magnet and grant personnel. Even if those positions are only contacts in your district with other responsibilities, you should consider including them. You will want to write about the qualifications of the MSAP principals in the grant, emphasizing any background they have in diversity, equity, and the magnet theme for their school in the grant. And district personnel with expertise in the magnet themes chosen for the grant should also be included. So if you were writing an arts theme into the grant, then the district arts director would be important to include. If you were writing an immersion theme into the grant, then the district world language specialist would be important to include, just as examples. And be sure to include their resumes in the appendix. So now we get to the big question of what positions to write into the grant to be funded. These are some examples of some of the district level positions that you may want to include in your grant, in addition to your project director. At the district level, you may want a technology facilitator, since most grants include a lot of technology and teachers need support and training to maximize their effectiveness. Even if you already have technology support in the district, you may want to consider someone just for the grant to make sure the MSAP schools have the additional support that they need. If you are writing a global theme into the grant, then you may want a global coach to oversee global integration at the schools in the grant, or to be the contact for world language teachers if you are writing a lot of world languages into your grant, or to be the point for International Baccalaureate if you are writing an IB theme into your grant. If literacy is part of your evidence of promise, then you may want a literacy coach to support the schools in the implementation and monitoring of the evidence of promise goals you have chosen for your grant. Or if you have AVID as your evidence of promise, you may want an AVID contact at the district level. A district marketing recruiting specialist can help inform and support the MSAP grant school magnet coordinators with recruiting and marketing their magnet theme. An MSAP grant budget analyst is another position to consider writing into your grant to help the project director manage all of the budgeting required of a large federal grant. All of these are just examples of district positions you may want to write into your grant. And these positions could be full-time or part-time depending on the needs of the themes you are writing into the grant. Be sure to have job descriptions for the MSAP funded positions in your appendix. At the school level, a magnet coordinator is very important to be the point person at the school to recruit and market, coordinate, and/or deliver magnet theme PD, and to ensure that the magnet theme is implemented with fidelity. If literacy is part of your evidence of promise, then having a literacy position at each of the grant schools to help support the successful implementation of your evidence of promise would be important. Or if your evidence of promise is around AVID, then you may want an AVID coach at each of the grant schools. There is no magic number of how many positions to have funded in the MSAP grant, but you have to be cautious of cost because positions are expensive, and also if you have too many positions, it makes it hard for you to make the sustainability argument of when the grant funds end and those positions are no longer available. My advice is to go light on the district level positions and put most grant funded positions in the schools. These positions will be included in your budget. Be sure to include job descriptions for the MSAP funded positions in the appendix. These are all examples of what you will want to write about the teachers at the MSAP schools and give specific examples around these topics. Pay particular attention to highlighting any background the teachers have in the theme that their school will have. Example, IB, environmental sciences, engineering, etc. Include sample resumes of some of the teachers at the MSAP schools where you can highlight their qualifications to support the grant implementation. Examples like world language, arts, IB, science, STEM, National Board Certified, advanced degrees. This would be the section to talk about if you will make all school staff reapply for their positions, since it will be a new or revised magnet school. Or if they don't have to reapply, maybe have them sign a document committing to the new magnet theme. Take a moment to think about what MSAP grant-funded positions you might include in your grant. This section is talking about all of the key personnel in your grant, from non-grant funded positions to grant funded positions, from teachers to administrators to the superintendent, whereas the previous slide is only talking about teachers. What knowledge and experience do they have in curriculum development and in desegregation strategies? These are some examples of what could be included for this regulation. These are just some grant tidbits that might be helpful as you write the personnel section or really any section of the grant. Use the Department of Education regulations as headings throughout your grant to show the direct connection of what you're talking about to what they're asking for. Remember that you are writing to convince the grant reader that you will be able to successfully implement your grant. Every position you write about in your grant should be tied to the magnet theme and reducing minority group isolation. Tell your district story and how you will increase school integration in your district using MSAP grant funds. Every district story is different, so tell your story. The Department of Education has all the previous grant cycle winners with a copy of their winning grant on their website for you to review. So definitely those are helpful for you to see and use as a model in your writing. Make clear and consistent connections between the sections of the grant. So make sure your budget is closely aligned to all the PD you talk about in your grant, all the positions you talk about in your grant, for example. And ensure that everything you talk about doing in your grant that will cost money that the district is not supported is reflected in your budget. I hope that this has been helpful for you as you plan to write your 2024 MSAP grant personnel section. Remember as you write all of your sections that you're telling your district's story and how they will implement the grant to increase school integration in your district. Good luck.